everyone, and I'm German. I usually wouldn't start a panel like this, but it might be of interest that I'm German. So yeah, we're here to talk about nuclear sharing arrangements. I'm going to be speaking to you a bit about how this came into being and where we are right now before my stellar panel will join me on stage. So we will also have some time for Q&A at the end, so keep that in mind when listening to us for a talk about our shared and national experiences. Before lunch, we heard that we have to do more on a national level and to do more to discuss the arrangements that are in place and what societies and parliaments can do to talk about the topic and how to get rid of those weapons stationed on our soil. It's hard to talk about something that is veiled in secrecy. So NATO nuclear sharing arrangements specifically are veiled in secrecy, as states, when they are asked about their arrangements, always say, oh, it's NATO, we can talk about it. So the next 1 hour and 15 minutes, we're going to talk about it, and I hope that we will also be able to talk to our governments about it, even more so in the future. Nuclear sharing is only a small part of the problem. The problem is much bigger, but I think it's our part of the problem, as we are citizens of countries that are nuclear complicit, and I think it's very important to talk about these topics openly and with information that is not usually given out by the governments who do this. So any facts and figures, numbers and dates you hear today is not really an official number or an official date, but it's experts who assess these things and who make educated guesses. So keep this in mind. Not every number might be what it really is, but it's the best we have. It's educated guesses. All right, so my idea or my goal of this session is to get you an idea of the history of nuclear stationing on foreign soil and to get into the question of how illegal it is, and then look at the reality in the 4 countries, and also we're going to dive a bit into Turkey as well, although we don't have anyone from Turkey here today. So yeah, let's start us off. As I said, that's the topic, the scheme of the session. And I'm going to jump right in. So this is what I would call foreign nuclear stationing. Nuclear sharing is a concept by NATO that was developed quite further down the line in the 60s, but we had stationing even before this. There are 3 states that had their nuclear weapons stationed in other countries, sometimes even without their knowledge. This is research that has been done by Matthew Fuhrman and Todd Sexer, so it's an educated guess, I'd say. And these are the countries that hosted nuclear weapons on their soil throughout history, and some of them do so today. As we've heard, there are 5 countries who do so today. But I really want to make the point that it's not just the US who does this. It was also the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom who put their nuclear weapons in other countries. They started stationing soon after joining the nuclear club, so 1945, 49, and 52 respectively, but the planning started earlier. You can't just put nuclear weapons in another country without just having some kind of arrangement in place and talking to the other countries. It's always 2 countries involved in these arrangements, and it's not just a decision to acquire nuclear weapons, it's a decision to let another country put nuclear weapons on your soil, and you're complicit in it. So let's take a quick look at the graph we have here. So we have the United States, who started stationing nuclear weapons in the United Kingdom and also Germany in the early 50s. And soon after, the Soviet Union started also putting nuclear weapons in East Germany. So Germany comes up 3 times in this graph because all of the nuclear armed powers stationed nuclear weapons on our soil. I'm not sure if that's an achievement, but it's a reality that we have. So the Soviet Union followed suit in the 50s and 60s, and please bear in mind, this is foreign nuclear stationing. This is not the weapons that were stationed on Soviet Union soil, which is now Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Ukraine. So this is just the foreign stationing. And you can also see that they put some nukes on Cuba, which we now know as the Cuba crisis. So it's intertwined in the history of the arms race and the Cold War that those 3 states put nuclear weapons, mostly in Europe, but also in Asia, and also in one case in Africa and Morocco, where the US stationed their nuclear weapons for quite some time. Especially with the United Kingdom, these are very educated guesses because nothing much is known about the stationing by the United Kingdom. But for the US, this is quite a good overview of where weapons were stationed before. At the same time, this foreign stationing was put into place. You can also see the NPT line put in there. In 1970, the NPT entered into force. So the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was designed to halt proliferation of nuclear weapons throughout the world. And it is also interlinked with the nuclear sharing discussion, of course. But you can see nuclear sharing, or the foreign stationing of nuclear weapons in general, as predates the NPT. So this is something to also keep in mind when we will discuss these things later. So why did these countries do this? This differs from proliferation reasons you can find in literature a bit, because as I said, there are two countries involved in all of this. And maybe a map might help. So you can see where nuclear weapons were stationed by these three countries. And I really want to get into why did they do this. And I think geography helps here a lot. So one of the reasons that is usually identified is, of course, deterrence. You want extended deterrence. You want to assure your partners that you will put Pittsburgh for Paris out there. So you want your weapons to be closer to the enemy. And during the Cold War, of course, in the early days, there were no intercontinental ballistic missiles. So you had to get the weapons closer to your adversary in order to threaten them with retaliation. So geography and proximity to your adversary is the reason of how those countries were chosen. Apart from deterrence and proximity, it's also, of course, to reassure your partners that you will indeed fight for them if they are attacked. And if nuclear weapons are in the game, the assurance is, of course, a bit, more convincing maybe to the countries who receive those weapons. Another reason, and that is sometimes very up high on the agenda, is, of course, non-proliferation. There are a few countries that had nuclear ambitions, not just nuclear latency, so they could not just technically get nuclear weapons, but they kind of thought about it. And Italy and, of course, Germany were two of those countries who thought about getting their own nuclear arsenals. And, of course, for the US, it's in their interest, in the non-proliferation interest, to not let them have their own nuclear weapons. So putting nuclear weapons on their soil might be enough for them to feel close to the power that nuclear weapons might have. Germany, of course, again, is a special case, all three stationed there, and all of the reasons apply. Not in every country, every reason, so deterrence, geography, and non-proliferation apply, but a mix of all of those is kind of working in all of those countries. As for numbers, we don't really know. The Soviet Union had, around 40,000 nuclear weapons during the Cold War. That was the height of the Cold War, where we had 70,000 nuclear weapons. In the world, experts assume that around 800 nuclear weapons were stationed in those orange countries you can see. Of course, most of the nuclear weapons from the Soviet Union were stationed on the soil of the Soviet Union, but not necessarily on the soil of what today is Russia. We had these discussions in the last year a lot due to Ukraine presumably having nuclear weapons, which they, of course, did not have. For the United Kingdom, they had around 500 nuclear weapons overall, but we don't really know how many they stationed on the other country's soil. For the US, we, of course, have numbers, and these are great numbers by Hans Christensen. So whenever you need numbers on anything nuclear, go to the Federation of American Scientists. You will get everything there. But it's still, I really want to say, it's an educated guess. And he says as himself, it's a guess. It's a guessing game. But in the end, for the US, at the height of the Cold War, you can see we had more than 7,000 nuclear weapons stationed in Europe. So this is just Europe. There's, of course, also Asia. But 7,000 weapons were on European soil during that time. Also, during the 60s, this foreign nuclear station was kind of transitioned into NATO nuclear sharing as we know it today. So it needs more acknowledgement from the other part. And over time, this is the nuclear umbrella that we now always talk about, the extended deterrence of NATO and the nuclear alliance that NATO calls themselves. So we also see a really big drop at the end of, at the beginning of the 90s. This is, of course, due to the Soviet Union breaking down and the reason for nuclear stationing changing. So I said it's deterrence and its proximity to your adversary. If your adversary breaks down, of course, that reason kind of goes down somewhere, and you don't necessarily need to have those weapons as close to your adversary as you need to. It's very expensive to host nuclear weapons in another country, and you need a lot of personnel and security over there to have these arrangements in place and to have them safe and secure. Also, we have, of course, the technical advancements. They don't serve a specific military purpose anymore because you can reach your potential adversary from your own country due to the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Of course, we also have escalation risks, and over time, of course, the states were more aware of those risks and decided to double down on the numbers. But it's also a cost-benefit reason. We can also talk later maybe a bit about withdrawal from Greece, also maybe from Canada, and why Lakenheath was putting off the map by the US. So I really want to jump into the next topic. Why is it legal? I mean, the short answer is it's not illegal, I'd say, but that is not the same thing as saying it's legal. So we have national laws in place in those countries that allow nuclear stationing. I know that other countries have laws in place that prohibit stationing during peacetime and during wartime. But we have in international law the NPT that kind of is the place to go when looking for the question whether nuclear sharing is illegal. So we have Article 1 and 2, and it prohibits the transfer of nuclear weapons or control of those nuclear weapons, and of course the other way around to receive the transfer and control. So what NATO does today, and again, we had those arrangements in place before the NPT came into force. So what NATO does is, well, we don't transfer those weapons. They're still ours, and we have command and control over these weapons, so we don't break the NPT with our arrangements. Well, yes, and the Soviet Union was saying throughout the 60s that this does not fit into the NPT, but still they had stationing in place on their own. But one could say that, at least today, it goes against the spirit of the treaty. So it goes against the Article 6 obligation to disarm, and this also applies to the host nations, of course. And we heard about norm development earlier. We have all those norms that were developed over time, that were defended over time. And it kind of goes against those norms to say that, well, there's a wartime exception. So those weapons would be transferred when a war is happening. And only then we would give them to the other country, but they're ours, and this is not a transfer. It's one of those loopholes that international treaties have, because international treaties are always a common denominator found by the countries negotiating them. But I think with norms and values that developed over time, and with practice also, it's kind of obvious that it's not very legal to do this anymore. We've also seen discussions on Belarus recently, and also with Finland and Sweden, whether it would be possible to station those nuclear weapons. And I think we should apply the same thinking to the stationing that is already happening. We can also look at the TPNW formulation, which is a bit different, because it says that each state party undertakes never under any circumstances to transfer weapons or command and control. It's a stronger formulation. It's a good one, but it's also NPT states who forged this formulation, and it kind of shows that many states in the world think that nuclear stationing on foreign soil is illegal. And I think that the nuclear armed states and also the host nations should clearly think about how they want to think about nuclear stationing on their soil. And I'm really glad that we are going to do this together and talk about the nuclear stationing on Belgian, Dutch, and Italian soil. So I really want to ask the other three panelists to come up to stage. Thanks. All right. Thanks for joining me. I'm really glad to not be on my own anymore. All right. On the far left, we have Francesco Vignaca. Francesco works as a campaigns coordinator for the recently established, I'm going to pronounce it, Rete Italiana Pace e Disarmo. And he's been in the field for now more than 15 years. He has worked on issues of military and arms reductions and disarmament for quite some time. Thanks. And I'm really glad that he will give us the Italian view on nuclear sharing. As you can see, Italy hosts in 2 air bases. Next is Alejandra Munoz. Alejandra is a project officer at the Dutch peace organization PAX. She has a background in international law and human rights, and prior to joining PAX, Alejandra worked as a legal advisor in the International Crimes and Accountability Program of the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights, and she has also worked on transitional justice issues in Colombia. Next up, last but not least, we have Emmeline Lievens. She's the coordinator of the Belgian peace movement, Vrede, which is part of the Belgian Coalition Against Nuclear Weapons. During her studies as a social worker, she began working on the campaign against the replacement of nuclear weapons in Belgium, and after her studies, she began as an educational worker on the theme of nuclear weapons at Vrede. I'm really glad to have all 3 of you on this panel with me, and since it's both a national but also a shared experience, I asked all of them to kind of tell us a bit about the national experiences and specific aspects to not have the same thing repeated over and over again. So, Francesco, Italy currently, as I said, hosts nuclear weapons in 2 air bases in Gedi and Aviano, and has been stationing nuclear weapons since 1956. So what is the specificity of the Italian arrangement, also with the military-industrial complex and the F-35s? I'd be really interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I will read some notes because I'm old. You know, I'm the oldest part of this panel, so I have to remember everything. Yes, the position of Italy in this framework is quite unique because we have the Gedi Air Base, which is a joint base, it's an Italian air base in which there is a squadron of the US maintaining the B-61, but also you have the Aviano base, which is completely US Air Force base, so no Italian sovereignty in general on this base. So it's quite different, the way we approach also from a campaign point of view. And why this happens? Because, you know, as you've seen before in the graph, Italy, apart from Germany, is the longest stationary country in history of nuclear sharing, because Italy and Germany were the losers of the Second World War, and all the reasons that already been mentioned. And in general, Italy and Germany are also the countries in which there are a lot of NATO and US bases. Overall, not only a nuclear one. For instance, in Italy, you got the main munition logistic base of the US in Europe, nearby Pisa, and also you have all the logistics for drones in Sigonella in Sicily. You don't see in pink, so my friends from Sardinia and Sicily will be upset about that, but they are also Italy. And Sicily was also involved in the crisis in the 80s about the new intermediate missiles. There was this crisis that led to the INF treaty that then was created by Trump and Putin. And this was historically a reason why the Italian peace movement also is quite strong on this, because the missiles was dispatched in Comiso, which is close to Sigonella, air base, and there was a lot of protests about that. But in general, historically, there were no efforts to put this issue on the table of the parliament, because every time that we try to bring up the issue, parliamentarians won't say anything. The government keeps saying, there are secret deals back in the 50s, like was very well explained before, so we don't care. Even some French MPs that went into the Gedi Air Base and asked directly the people in the base, but where are the nuclear weapons? The response was no comment, even the MPs. So the problem of transparency, as my colleague will say, is quite important. And it's interesting that even discussion in the parliament were never permitted. It's different in other countries. In Italy, we say that this is a Pulcinella secret. Pulcinella is a carnival mask. It's like a secret that everybody knows about, but no one will tell anything about that. We were more successful in trying to engage with the public opinion. But the problem is that the polls that we have done with ICAN showed that only 50% of Italian people know that there are nuclear warheads in our territory. And this is something we have to work on, because when we can raise this number, also we can raise the total number of people against the stationary of US warheads and in favor of the TPNW. And we were able to do that also because we tackled the issue not only as a strategic issue or a problem of politics, but also from the cost point of view. We were able in the past to present some estimates, educated estimates, the best we can do, about how much money Italy has to spend every year to maintain this hosting situation. We estimate about 120, 150 million euros every year just to have the base ready for that. And also there were a lot of new building and construction works because Gedi Air Base now has to host the F-35. I will talk about that later on. And also when we found out these really images and facts that showed that really the warheads are there. When Daniel Hochstadt, that you always know, went to Italy in 2018 to present our first report, we were able to present a photo taken by the US Moon Squadron in Gedi, and they were, all smiling in front of a B-61 with the tornadoes on the rear and the Alps on the rear. So it was really a way, and they posted that on the Facebook page of the squadron. So a lot of secrecy, but then you take a photo with a nuclear bomb. We inserted this action also in the long-standing campaign against F-35s. Differently from the other countries, Italy has been involved in the program since the beginning because it's a second-tier partner of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. Apart from the US and UK is the third country that put a lot of money in this. So we were able since the beginning to point out that the F-35s were not only a problem of military expenditure and cost, but also because of the stable capacity they have, the conventional one and the nuclear one. And we were also able to lower the total number of acquisitions from 131 to 90 because of the cost approach. And this can be quite interesting because maybe not a lot of people in the public opinion are willing to engage in discussion on nuclear sharing, nuclear strategy, and these foreign policy difficult things. But if you point out to them then to permit the US to station some warheads here, even if something that, of course, our governments want to do because politically they are more allied than the other allies, it's a cost for you. And that always is something that, struck the people. We have also, and this is my final point, a good engagement with local authorities, in particularly in the region of Brescia. Brescia is the main town within the reach of Gedi Air Base. So in that region, we have nearly 60 local authorities signing the ICAN Cities Appeal. And that's why, that's because, people near to the base are more aware of the issue, and so it's more in favor of nuclear disarmament and to reduce the impact of nuclear sharing. So that is something that copes with what I was saying before, the fact that we have to raise the number of people that is aware of all of this. In general, it's not easy to do the same in Aviano because it's a US air base. So people keep saying, okay, but it's not our business. In the past, we brought out some legal action against the presence of nuclear warheads in Aviano, and they were dismissed because the counterpart is a US government. IDU can put US government into the Italian tribunal. So it's quite interesting why over there it's less easy for us to do something, and also for different political environment. Finally, from our point of view, we really do think that strengthening the joint efforts on nuclear sharing and in nuclear sharing countries in Europe is crucial, because we can have those countries, and then maybe the European Union, work more on the issue, be more engaged with the TPNW, and in general to build more concrete steps towards a real nuclear disarmament. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much. There were many very interesting points that we will dive into deeper in the discussion, but I think it's really interesting that you said that we should act together as the host nations, because I don't think they see themselves as a group of host nations, and they really don't want to see themselves as a group of host nations, but always say, oh, but we get a seat at the table at the nuclear planning group, and it's a better seat if we have nuclear weapons there. And that is at least the argumentation that we have in Germany. Alejandra, the Dutch parliament is often asked about the nuclear stationing, the modernization just recently in December 2022. So it's slightly different from what Francesco told us about Italy. So I'd be interested in how the Netherlands talks about their nukes.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Maren. And also thank you for the invitation to speak on this panel about the situation in the Netherlands. As Maren already alluded to, I'd like to go a little bit into the political context and the role Parliament has played with respect to this issue, because I'd say that pressure from Parliament has really been crucial in raising the issue of nuclear sharing, and also very much connected to that in encouraging Dutch positive engagements with the TPNW. So it was, well, in addition to pressure from civil society, it was a motion in Parliament, for example, that pushed the Dutch government to participate as the only NATO states in the negotiations that led up to the adoption of the TPNW in 2017. And then again, last year, in a very similar way, with the first meeting of states parties in Vienna, a motion was adopted in Parliament only a few days before the start of the conference, which also lets the Dutch to participate as an observer at the very last minute. Now, specifically regarding the topic of the Netherlands being a host state to US nuclear weapons, that has been, I'd say, more challenging to raise exactly because of this consistent lack of transparency by the Dutch government around the nuclear sharing issue. It's already been mentioned. It's not unique to the Netherlands, but it has very much obstructed any open and democratic debate about the presence of these bombs on our territory, and you know, the ethical and security and financial implications of this arrangement. So very similar to when we as civil society have tried to raise this issue. Whenever parliamentary questions have been asked, the answer has always been, in light of our allied agreements, we cannot make any statements as to the number and the numbers and locations of US nuclear weapons in Europe, and of course with allied agreements referring to NATO. What we've also seen is that calls from Parliament in the past to work towards the removal of the nuclear bombs from our territory, or to end the Dutch nuclear task, have been met by this brick wall of NATO. So the Dutch the Dutch government has always responded that that type of decision should be a NATO decision, rather than something for the Netherlands itself to decide. And this is simply not the case, because the presence of these weapons are the result of bilateral agreements between the US and the Netherlands. Several agreements that specify who's responsible for what, who bears the cost for what. But these are bilateral agreements, meaning that any negotiations towards terminating this arrangement can also take place bilaterally. So it's simply not the case that this has to be a NATO decision. It's clear that it's not a formal requirement, but rather a political choice. But this response from the Dutch government, Maren was already mentioning that it does fit into this wider rhetoric of NATO as a whole, of calling itself a nuclear alliance and making the nuclear sharing issue a NATO issue rather than that of individual countries, which then in turn allows for these individual countries like the Netherlands to hide behind NATO whenever whenever faced with critical questions or critical voices. And then linked to that, similar to the German case, the Dutch also argue that they still want to take an active part in discussions around NATO's nuclear deterrence policies and want it to be taken seriously in those discussions, and that any type of decision taken unilaterally by them would harm their credibility in this sense. I'd say that over the recent years, the political climate around this issue has been challenging, because what we're seeing in the Netherlands is that actually quite a few political parties do support signing the CPNW in their programs, including 2 of the 4 parties currently in government, but they're not very vocal about this support and about nuclear disarmament in general. And we're seeing that more and more, especially since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There's this reluctance in Parliament to take a leading role in these debates and really speak out. And some parliamentarians acknowledging and saying, our party always used to support nuclear disarmament, including the removal of these bombs from our territory, as a trust-building measure towards Russia. We actually had hopes that this could be done. But now, with the current security climate and the way Russia has been acting, this hope has faded a little bit. So that's what we're seeing right now. But nevertheless, what has proved to be successful is persistence. So with the motion that I mentioned that pushed the Dutch government to participate as an observer in Vienna last year, that was actually the 3rd time that same motion had been brought. Only that the first 2 weren't successful, partially due to parties not voting in accordance with their own programs, but there were also others that we needed to get on board. And actually, with the first motion, we weren't so sure what an early no in Parliament would mean for our chances later on. But with each time, the number of votes increased until it was eventually adopted and made the Dutch go to Vienna. And then, of course, it also helped that there was movement in other NATO states during that period. So first Norway announcing their participation, and later also Germany. So those developments helped as well. And then just lastly, I already mentioned the topic of transparency. And as Maren mentioned, a motion was adopted last November that requested the government to be more transparent about the planned modernization of the nuclear bombs on our territory. And this motion followed the Politico article that announced that it might be already the case that the bombs would arrive in December. In a couple of weeks, there will be a debate on this topic, where again, it will be an opportunity also for us to reach out and give some input. And as I mentioned, we'd like parliamentarians to be more vocal about this issue, which is difficult in the current climate. But what we currently feel is that this issue of transparency, of informing Parliament, and about having a democratic process about an issue that is so major and has such wide-ranging implications, that type of argumentation is more likely to resonate right now in Parliament and could lead people to speak up. So we hope, we hope that this issue will be taken further and will generate more resistance against new bombs and nuclear sharing in general. Thank you.
Thanks so much for these interesting insights from the Netherlands. So, Emmeline, Belgium has been credited with being a staunch opponent of nuclear sharing, at least the civil society. So I'd be interested on the public opinion and public engagement in Belgium surrounding these weapons. And I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. Like say in the introduction, my background is social worker. So in my work, I really focus what the power of citizens can be in the topic of nuclear weapons or topic of international policies. And it will also a little bit focus on what I'm saying. Francesco mentioned the YouGov poll. We got like some of the same results in Belgium. I just looked, but 46% of the Belgium know of new. It was a poll in 2020 that they are nuclear weapons in Belgium. And for us, it was a real wake-up call. We can get a bigger organization, bigger movement, bigger protest if half of the Belgians don't know they are nuclear weapons. If they don't know it, they can't be against it, like say before. So for us, that was a really big point to work on it. And it was also the starting point of a school project we launched. Not only Vrede, it's a big project with a lot of organizations in Belgium. Also Pax Christi, who is leading the project. And the school project focused on people who need to vote for the first time. So the students are 17, 18 years old. And we give them the information about nuclear weapons. But we also ask their opinion, make that they can decide which position they take. And also, at last of the session, we also think about small steps people can do. And an example is at the school, a class writes a letter to their director saying that information about the current situation, because we all get the history lessons, but in the history lessons, they don't talk about the current situation. And they ask that it has to be mandatory at the school to get lessons about the current situations. And it's a really nice thing to do with the students, to think what you can do as students being on the big team. And also in other actions, we are really looking for small steps citizens can do. Another example is the actions against the banks who are investing in nuclear weapons. We ask citizens to complain to their bank and ask, like, I don't want that my money gets involved in any investments about nuclear weapons. And in Belgium, it leads to KBC is a Belgian bank who withdraw them because they get too many complaints of their clients. That's also an example how we try to move people with little steps, things they have the feeling that they are impacts on something, to move to actions. Maybe another example is, you have like the International Day Against Nuclear Weapons in September. We always ask citizens and cities to hang a peace flag on their city building. And most of the time, around 150 and 200 cities are participating. By hanging the flag, you ask our government to sign the TPNW, and also there we see citizens has been an important role in that campaign. A lot of citizens write letters, emails, or advising groups, citizens advising groups. In almost every city, you have like the advising group to the city about things that are of the global solidarity, and it's really through the pressures of citizens or the advising groups that cities join the campaign and ask to our governments to sign. Also, the ICAN city appeal is also part of that campaign. We have more than 100 cities that has joined, and for us, it's also a kind of campaign. It's like they write about it in every small magazine of every city. So it's not the big news, but everyone read it in their city magazine that there are nuclear weapons in Belgium, that their city is against the nuclear weapons in Belgium. And we're really trying to focus on get the number higher of people who are knowing. Maybe back to the schools, but also interesting, we started with the schools that are in the city around Kleine Broghel, what's the air base or nuclear weapons are stationed. And also there, a lot of people didn't know. It was not an easy region to work on the team, because the people who know, you heard arguments like, if they attack our military bases, we will die directly. So we don't have a problem. It was really nice to have like first that group of students with us. We also see them. We have an action at the base, Kleine Broghel. There you also see like people in the neighbor. So that's an interesting part to work with. So I think for Belgium, where we're struggling with is we get citizens to sign a letter to their mayor. We get citizens to hang their flag or join a meeting of a seminar about nuclear weapons. But it's really difficult to really get them on the street and to have like a big manifestation of things like that. In Belgium, the biggest manifestation is still the one against the nuclear weapons. In 1983, we are 14 years after, and like back then they have really like a notion of urgency, I think, and a notion of danger. And I think as organizations, it's important that we showing that there is still an urgency to remove those weapons, and also with the plan of get new nuclear weapons on our territory. For us, it's also a thing that we need to do more actions, of national actions at the base. So that's also the plan of this year, to go back to the base again. I was thinking, I will just take a peek. I think I said the most of the things about the Belgium case. I think it's important to not only strengthen our own group in Belgium. So I don't know if I say it, but Vrede is part of the Belgian coalition against nuclear weapons. So we are with a big coalition in Belgium. It's 60 organizations. It's organizations, the unions are in it, but also women organizations, climate organizations. So it's important that we are a big platform, but we see that the peace organizations is really leading the platform, and some of them are really, how do we say, passive in the platform. So for us also in Belgium, it's really important to get the union more involved in our actions, in their, that they put a little bit more effort on the team. Also trying to link with the climate organizations. We have Greenpeace in Belgium who is really working together on the team, but other climate organizations is difficult to get involved with. We see a big, like I think in the other countries too, the last year the climate movement has grew a lot. They are able to get big manifestations, what's not so easy in Belgium. But they are really focusing on a point, and they are really, sometimes I think also a little bit afraid to lose their big public. So that's a struggle we are dealing with, to get more other organizations involved and really showing that we should do it together, or we will not stop the nuclear policy by now. Yeah, I think that was.
Thanks so much. All right. So I see a common theme here, and that is the NATO brick wall. We have the lack of knowledge and the lack of transparency, which is also like a vicious cycle in the end. And we need to get the info out and also explain why these weapons should not be here anymore. You see it on the picture. There are 100 weapons stationed around Europe. We have not yet talked about Turkey and maybe also how it's the government's decision to do this. So Alejandra, you alluded to the party programs and government coalitions who have it in their program, but somehow once they are in the government, they kind of lose this promise. We had the same thing with Germany in 1929. Our foreign minister said, okay, now it's time we lose them. And they never did. And we have it again in our coalition agreement from 2021. So how does, in your opinion, how does it come into being that parties want to do something, but then they don't once they're in government? Is that a common theme you see?
Well, we've seen it in the past as well, because I'd say, about around 2009, 2010, around the time also of the Obama speech, like the climate was a lot more, the political climate was a lot more, positive in that sense. And I'd say that at that time, looking at the political parties, the division was more, I'd say most of them were supportive of removing the weapons from our territory, but the division was more where some would say, yes, but we should converse about this within NATO. This should be a process within NATO, and then the other side would say, no, we should just do it directly with the US and be more assertive. And already there we had some some politicians belonging in the second group that then also stepped back a little bit the moment they were in government. So we've definitely seen it before. I'd say right now, it's, yes, the fact that some are in government, but also the fact that we're just seeing more reluctance to go into this issue at all in the current security context. So it's a bit of a combination, I'd say.
Okay. And Francesco, you alluded to money being an issue. So Germany has laid open how much it'll cost to renew the airbase in Büchel. It'll be quite expensive to make it ready for the new B-6112. And we also decided on buying the F-35. So I think the modernization is around 250 million euros, and the F-35s is around 8 billion. So it's a lot of money that is put into this. Why do states like Italy, like Germany, decide to put this money in there? So what do they get out of it?
Because in nuclear disarmament, MED is not only mutual assured destruction, but also the approach of some governments. No, but apart from this, also the narrative changed a lot after the Ukraine invasion. Okay, now the same politicians and parties that before were trying to hide the military expenditure raising, like we are doing only peace mission, we are only spending for security. Now they are eager to say we want more money for weapons, and the same goes without by saying of the European Union. You know, so this is something that can change a little bit the approach. I think that before that, the decisions were not made on nuclear disarmament or nuclear presence, but were made because they wanted to modernize the weapons, and of course, regarding the planes, they wanted to put some money again. Because, you know, if you see, both Italy and Germany are part of the Eurofighter production, and then came the F-35. Now there's the new 6th generation planes being developed, even if now Italy is within UK and Germany is with France and Spain, we are with Sweden. So it's always something that comes from the pressure of the military industrial complex to get more money. I don't think the framing of this is about nuclear weapons, but of course it impacts also the nuclear weapons. We are not lucky as you. We do not have official estimates of the modernization of GEDI. We were able only to dig into the documents and find out that the renewal of the base was like 190 million euros in total. But then, like I said before, we estimate 120, 150 in general, because also you have some things to do if you host bases. You have to provide security outside the base, you have to provide a lot of logistical construction around the base, which are not paid directly by the US. And this is not only for GEDI, but in general, we estimate that all the US base in Italy costs at our government more than 600 million euros at year. And then for the acquisition of the F-35s, we have 350 million per year. So that is a problem, but can be also an occasion. If you tell people that this is your money that has been spent and nobody is disclosing how it's spent, and also the link between your own money as a private person and the banks. We already had in place a strong campaign on armed banks, not on nuclear weapons, but on exports. But now we are improving these also with ethical banks, and we will launch this year a new rating about the involvement of banks. Because, of course, it's not easy to say you are in or out, because then a lot will be in and only a few out, but also the amount of your involvement in this. Just a final note, going a bit outside your question, but just to have some optimism and something that can come, good after the dramatic situation we all witnessed last year. The peace movement in Italy was quite vocal on the Ukraine situation, and we were able to do a lot of rallies. The last one was in Rome in November with more than 100,000 people. But the interesting thing is that apart from the part of the platform directly linked to the Ukraine situation, we were able to put in this platform, which has been endorsed by more than 600 organizations all over Italy. Our network is only 70 organizations that usually work on this issue. So to jump from 70 to 600, and that in the platform, the third key point is nuclear disarmament and TPNW. So from one side, the Ukraine invasion has made the government being more on the military side and the security side, and also asking to raise the military expenditure. But for the civil society, and in general for a lot of organizations that never worked on peace, never worked on nuclear disarmament. You think about Greenpeace, which is doing a lot of great work lately, but also other environmental associations in Italy. They are really thinking about the fact that you cannot get peace, or you cannot get a good approach to climate change without getting rid of nuclear weapons. And this is something that really surprised me, Because when we propose this point, like another one to put inside this platform, everybody says, yes, let's do that. And also the Catholic Church is quite vocal on this in Italy, which is important for Italy, of course. Not only the Pope, which already were like an ICAN supporter, you know, you can say, we can give him the pin. But I don't know if it goes with the white clothes so well, but let's try. But also the bishops that usually are more conservative than the Pope now, which is crazy, but you know, it goes like this. And we were really surprised by that. So I think that it's interesting, this connection that you mentioned, because it's something that can help the whole movement on nuclear disarmament.
Thanks so much also for the optimism. That is always good on a panel. Yeah, it's all planned out, but I really want to have the last question for Emmeline, and then we will open the floor for questions, as I said in the beginning, just a few more minutes. So we have two examples of states and governments who decided to leave this arrangement behind. It was Canada, who said they wanted to reduce tensions and reduce the risk of nuclear war, and also Greece, who wanted to reduce tensions with neighboring Turkey. Turkey, on the other hand, we had the upheavals in 2016, and we had discussions about the removal. And how come, I think my mic is off.
Maybe we can repeat.
We can sing meanwhile if you want. Just.
Well, I got fueled up.
Was not worth.
We don't have to.
All good. Okay, so now I have to find back into my train of thought. So we have examples of countries leaving this. And I think that we have all the knowledge in the world. We know that this is not good, and we have parties that say that this is not good, but not the government. So what is the role that civil society should play in this, and how can we maybe be louder and be more heard in immersing this knowledge? I mean, you mentioned children, and I think youth and children, that is kind of a good way, but how do you see the possibility of kind of immersing knowledge into society and politics?
Yeah, also in Belgium, it's the same problem that our government cannot say that there are nuclear weapons in Belgium. And that starts, and I will give another example of an action. We are looking into it because we have like a new petition rights in Belgium, who say that you can, if you have enough, how do you say? Signatures of citizens, you can ask an open debate in the parliament. And that's the thing we are looking for, because it would be interesting, because it's a thing they never has been transparent in the parliament before. And it's interesting because you get a lot of citizens against the ask for a transparent debate on nuclear arms. And I think like petition rights or other things in other countries that are interesting to really ask for debates in the parliaments that are public. And that would be my point of view to get our governments speak open about the theme.
Okay, sounds like fun Christmas dinners. Yeah, now we have time for your questions. I think we have a mic. Ova's there with a mic. So we have a question here up front. Thanks, Ova. In the blue,
yeah. Hello. I'm Marian Kübke from Germany. I work for Fellowship of Reconciliation on nuclear weapons, and I'm also a spokesperson of the German White Campaign, Büchel is Everywhere, Nuclear Weapon Free Now, which contains of 75 organizations in Germany. So the resistance in Germany here against the nuclear sharing has not been represented at all. I want to let you know, next year we're going to be 30 years resisting. We have over 100 people have been on trial. over the 25 years for bringing this issue of the illegality of nuclear sharing towards the highest court. Or actually, our court has international laws above our German law. So they would have to decide about this. Is it illegal or is it not? And we got our rights being refused. Right now, there are 18 people went to the Constitutional Court over these last 20 years, and it was not being picked up, even though 85% of the German population wants these nukes to be out. Not only that, too, one of them is me. We have a complaint at the European Court of Humanitarian Law because this has not been, our expert witnesses had not been allowed in court to speak. So when here a woman who is not an international law expert is saying that these weapons she thinks are not illegal, we think with our international law experts the opposite. And that's very important because not only IALANA Germany, that is the International Association of Lawyers Against International Law, they are part of the coalition. They have their statement on nuclear weapons in English and German, and there was just last year a global meeting of IALANA. They came to the same solution. It can be all found and downloaded on their website. So actually, I would like in ICAN, because I think it's very important that ICAN has a discussion about this, because there are so many taboos being broken over the years, and these has to be named. It's not just Russia alone, and that's a good thing on the first membership, party of membership, the state parties who signed the treaty. They signed the treaty and they don't blame a single country. They blame all nuclear powers, and especially with the new B6112, which is being produced and into exchange in all these countries for the old B61, this is also a violation because this is a total new nuclear bomb. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
There was a question in there, but okay.
I found this important to say this because there was nothing about Germany here, but it was presented as if all countries were being presented here with their resistance.
There's no one from Turkey as well, so we didn't manage, but I have a triple threat here, and I said it's not illegal. I didn't say it's legal. Just, but if you have a question, please come forward.
My name is John LaForge. I work with Nuke Watch in Wisconsin and the German campaign to rid Germany of the U.S. nuclear weapons. The presenter here did say that the Non-Proliferation Treaty prohibits transfer and control, and that this is a loophole in the Non-Proliferation Treaty that gives the impression that nuclear sharing is lawful. However, this is not correct. It's not precisely correct. The treaty prohibits transfer or control, and when you deal with legal terms, you have to be very precise. Therefore, to be clear, the mere transfer of nuclear weapons from the US to European NATO states is a violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now, because nuclear sharing is an obvious and ongoing Non-Proliferation Treaty violation, we can further stigmatize nuclear weapons, one of the principal objects of the TPNW, or promoting it, by demanding that the practice of nuclear sharing be immediately halted, that plans to replace the US nuclear weapons now in Europe with brand new nuclear bombs, the B6112, be canceled, and that all US nuclear weapons in Europe be permanently returned to the United States. So my question is, would the panelists agree that sharing openly violates the letter and the spirit of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and support demand for immediate and permanent withdrawal?
Thanks for that question. It's used as a loophole. Of course, treaties work like this. And in my personal opinion, I do agree that this is illegal. I'm not a lawyer, never stated that. I'm a political scientist, so I absolutely agree that it is at least not illegal, not legal. In the end, it's up to lawyers to decide if it's illegal in the end, but I'd be interested in your opinion, so anyone who wants to jump in.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
We are advocating for the TPNW, so for us, getting rid of the nuclear weapons in Italy and other countries is step one. So, of course we are in favor to get rid of those weapons. How to do that? Also because in the past we tried to put in the Italian parliament a popular law. You can, if you get more than 50,000 signatories, you can place a law in the parliament and has to be discussed, but of course it's never considered by the parliament. We tried to do that with a declaration of Italy as a nuclear-free zone, okay? Like you have in other parts of the world. But this approach, this legal approach, in my view now, is not the best way to obtain what we want. Because I think that, they can change the deal in some way. It's something that you can say. I'm not particularly problematic about that. But really, I think that now we have to establish more engagement on the public opinion. And that's the only card we can play, the political willingness to do that it can reach, get us to get rid of these weapons. For instance, I'd prefer to put our efforts in something that can educate people. I have mentioned before one wonderful thing we have gone in Italy, which is the Senza Atomica exhibition. My colleagues from Senza Atomica are really good. Even the first version of the exhibition, they got more than 350,000 people attending, mostly young people. And now with the new version, we will get more and more people. I think that now, if we have some energies and capacity, this kind of approach is better than doing the legal actions, but maybe it's because we failed in the legal action in the past, like I said in Aviano. So it's not something that I would rule out, but not something that we feel in Italy is the first thing to do now. I don't know if you want to join me.
Yeah, I agree. I think with coming of the new bombs, it got like a new perspective on the legal questions. But also in Belgium, we are not focusing on it. We have like a case, I think it's 3 years now, of peace organizations who has a case against Belgium about exports that used. We won the case, but nothing happens. Like they just don't say, and they pay for they pay for the case, but that's what it's, and it's you have like, you need a lot of means to go to the court. It's a lot of time you need to put effort in it, and in that case, if you look behind, it didn't have the results that we are hoping on. But I think it's a good point, and I think all that we need to combine all the actions. So I like it that in German there is a lot to do about legal actions, and I think it only can be inspiring also for other countries. And let's hope that if we combine all the things, that we get to the same goal.
Alejandra, anything to add?
I mean, I would say quite similarly in the Netherlands, there has been this legal battle, and it has not been successful. So I would personally, I think what's really key is the transparency issue, because when you don't have transparency, there's no responsibility, and that's really what we're seeing right now. Like I mentioned, this combination of what our countries are doing, this combination of, on the one hand, not being able to confirm or deny, and then on the other hand, constantly hiding behind NATO and acting like they have no say in the matter, and they're not in a position to push for change. And that combination makes it really difficult for us to advocate against these weapons on our territory. Like also with the topic of the new bombs, like we're speaking out against a replacement of something that's never even formally acknowledged. We talk about it. These bombs we don't know when they will arrive exactly. So it's it's not something subject to parliamentary approval. So it's really, it makes our work very difficult. And in order for change to happen, I think this taking responsibility is a first step. And that's not being done right now since there's no transparency. So that's.
Can I?
Yeah.
I just. I think it's also some of the national laws that are important in the case. Like in Belgium, our law say NATO states can station in Belgium and get material with them. That is only has to an agreement of the government and not of the parliament. So it's under Belgium law, and that's a law we are really working with politicians on to change that, because if it should be approved to the parliament, then we can have again an open discussion also with the replacement of the bombs. So yeah.
And also we don't know anything about the secret deals of the 50s. Every time they keep referring to that, and it's difficult to start a legal action if you don't know even the rules of the game.
All right, we are already out of time. I'm really sorry. But I think we should use all parts of the democratic process that we have and also interlink between the nuclear hosting nations even better than we have today. Some things that our governments are not likely to do, but I think that civil society would be the key to this movement. And I'm really thankful for your inputs, and hope everyone enjoyed this panel. Thanks so much.